You're listening to a podcast by Change My Relationship, featuring licensed marriage and family therapist and author Carla Downing. These podcasts are designed to provide you with practical solutions based on biblical truths for all your relationships. Today, Carla will be interviewing a guest who has experienced a relationship problem and successfully worked through it.
So I'd like to welcome you to Change My Relationship podcast. I have with me today, again, this is part 2, with Kathleen and Elizabeth. Both are married to men with Asperger's, and we're going to be talking today about how to restore your sense of self in a neurodiverse marriage. In addition, they both run a private Facebook group called My Aspie and Me. So they regularly interact with hundreds of women who also are married to men with Asperger's. They have heard many women talk about losing their sense of self, which is what the prior podcast was about. And in this one, we are going to be focusing on how to restore your sense of self. So welcome, Kathleen and Elizabeth.
Good morning, Carla.
So a term that we use when we're talking about a loss of sense of self is codependency. There are 2 origins of codependency. Can you explain what those are?
Yes. One type of codependency is developed within the Asperger's marriage. The wife doesn't need her husband to be dependent upon her. What she desires from him is to become responsible and reciprocal in their relationship and share responsibilities. However, into the marriage, she comes to realize that she's investing so much of herself in covering what the ND husband cannot. And she desires to have all her efforts recognized and validated for which they may not be. Another type of codependency that we find is from childhood, that comes from a learned behavior developed with the child prioritizing the needs and emotions of others at the expense of their own. They may have needed to be caretakers or caregivers with emotionally unstable parents or caregivers. They may have developed a deep-rooted need for approval and validation, and yet not recognizing their own feelings and needs, which then leads to unhealthy relationships into adulthood. Now, they are dependent on approval of others to feel good about themselves, and they have difficulty setting boundaries. They may also fear abandonment. We also see relationship dependency happen when the wife has core difficulties loving or trusting herself and needs the relationship to provide validation and value. So she seeks identity, safety, and meaning in life through another person, which is her husband. Staying with him becomes a matter of survival for her. Because the neurodiverse marriage relationship may not perform according to her neurotypical expectations, the NT wife fears it will not happen, and then she strives to make it so, which can lead her into dependency. Her fear may start speaking to her, and it says, without your husband, where's your identity? Without him, you'll feel empty. And without him, you may be nothing. And this is why she needs the marriage relationship to work neurotypically. Now, the NT wife may not realize it yet, that her relationship needs to be neurodiverse rather than neurotypical. But because if it does not change into a neurotypical marriage, she may feel abandoned, left on her own, and on her own, she may feel she's not enough. And then at last, what does this say about her worth? Now, no woman desires to experience these emotions, so she now enters into control mode, which can lead her in dependency. And I just want to take a brief minute here to share that while the neurotypical wife is into dependency, we have the neurodiverse husband who is having difficulty with social cues, communication, and emotional expression. Yet these are the very things the wife is desiring from him. He's going to see her desires as unrealistic, unreasonable, because of how his brain is neurologically developed. She will feel misunderstood and unmet, with intensified emotional distress and feelings of isolation. So we start to see that codependency dynamic and the challenges leaves each partner not being understood, with increased frustration.
Wow. So I'm hearing that that is a little bit different take than the normal codependency, because what I'm hearing thrown in there is she desperately needs him to be normal, which is what neurotypical is talking to have his brain and his relationship functioning be like it would in a marriage to somebody who does not have Asperger's. Am I
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yes.
And that expectation and that deep need, which is tied to her worth and her identity, feels like it absolutely has to happen or she's not okay.
That is also correct. There really is a mismatch taking place.
Yes. Okay, and we're going to talk more about that as we go.
Right.
But I just want to have listeners cue into when you say when she expects a neurotypical marriage, because we are going to talk about how to change that expectation, and that is going to have a lot to do with her being able to be okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is talking about how you lose your sense of self or how you become codependent. So now let's talk about how do you restore or develop if you didn't have a sense of self, a strong sense of self from childhood because you had childhood codependency. It's going to be how do you develop a sense of self? How do you finally get that even in the midst of a neurodiverse marriage? But before we do that, if a wife takes the focus off of trying to force her husband to be different, to be normal, to be like she needs him to be, and puts it onto herself, won't everything fall apart? I mean, if he's not functioning when she's trying hard to get him to do what he needs to do, how is it going to work if she just stops trying to change him and puts the focus on herself?
We have seen that happen. And it needs to be a different structure. And sometimes it needs to fall apart because if she keeps holding on to trying to make it happen, she does so at the risk of losing herself. You can't have both sometimes. What she may need to come to understand is that she's not going to have the neurotypical expectation relationship. She will have a neurodiverse. It's going to happen differently.
Mm.
And that can be okay.
Okay. So she has to shift her focus then onto herself. It's kind of like put the oxygen mask on yourself first an airplane, they'll tell you, before you put it on the person sitting next to you who needs your help. Because if you don't, you're not going to be there. So if she's losing herself and she's falling apart, then she's got to essentially rescue herself, fix herself, get herself back together. And then part of that is going to be in changing that expectation.
That plays into her self-care.
Yes. Okay. So that is you really, really key to understand. So she needs to let go because it's not healthy for her the way it is. The first thing that you mentioned is self-care. Can you talk about self-care?
Yes, I can. Self-care is just that, caring for yourself first in meeting your own needs. And this does not mean you are being self-centered. It's foundational for your personal well-being and growth. It allows you to be a better version of yourself. And if you have children, it allows you to be a better support to them. It's providing respect to yourself. And we can only expect others to care and respect us to the measure that we respect and care. Self-care in a neurodiverse marriage relationship is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Also with that is improving the diet, because vitamin and mineral deficiencies can play havoc with your body, mind, and nervous system. She needs to exercise, which boosts her self-esteem, improves her emotional regulation, reduces stress, and improves sleep. It's going to allow her to take a break from ruminating on negative aspects. She may also need to journal as a means to express her thoughts and emotions outside of herself, which enables her to look at matters objectively and help to process her emotions. And then it's very important that at least once a month, she plans something for herself to look forward to. And she needs to say yes to herself and her needs, and then develop self-worth that's not dependent on others to provide it for her. And Carla, you teach us to learn to self-validate, and you do a wonderful job in encouraging us to do this, to fill ourselves with the validation that we would want from others.
So I also teach self-care. I call it nurture yourself in my 10 principles. And I tell women and men, start small. If you are not used to taking care of yourself, just do one little thing a day. It might only be 10 minutes. And often the reason that you don't take care of yourself is because you either feel that it's selfish, or you feel sometimes Christian women will have the feeling that God doesn't want them to put others or put themselves before others, that they should always put others before themselves. Also, we have a part of the dysfunctional family rules. One of them is don't be selfish, and that means don't put yourself first, don't take care of yourself. But also part of her identity is, I'm hearing you say with the codependency, is in doing the things she needs to do in her marriage to try to make her marriage and her family, if she has children, work neurotypically. So she's exhausted because
Yes.
she's just trying so hard to make this work and figure this out, that in that process, she just completely ignores her own needs. So starting small, asking yourself, if you've completely lost yourself, you may not even know what you like. You may not even know what you want. You may not know what you need. So you have to start really small and just saying, what did I used to like before this marriage? What did I used to enjoy doing? What could I do? And I agree 100%. Exercise is a great stress relief, even if it's just a 10-minute walk. So very important that you do that. But I've had women tell me, because of the dysfunction in the marriage, and that would be the same thing here, that they sometimes are afraid to leave their homes with children because they're afraid everything's going to fall apart. So you have to give yourself permission to take care of yourself.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm sure that these women are coming into these marriages, many of them, with some past trauma. And we hear a lot about trauma now. Trauma just has to do with experiences in the past that have harmed you, that are affecting you in the present. So it can be many different types of things. So how does past trauma affect how she responds to the stress of an Asperger's marriage?
Well, she may need to learn how to uproot, relearn, and reteach. And what I mean by this is many NT wives have experienced trauma, have emotional wounds, and false beliefs that originated from childhood. The trauma is triggered by being in an ND marriage relationship, so they need to discover their roots and do what's necessary to heal. These are the classes that you offer and we offer in our group. Truth in the Mirror, Healing the Wounds of Your Past, 10 Life-Saving Principles for Women in Difficult Marriages.
Yes, and what you mean is that you take my classes, my materials that are normally taught through Change My Relationship, and you offer them via My Aspie and Me.
Yes, correct.
And I really appreciate you doing that. it's been very helpful, I know, to the women that you have worked with. So I also teach about grieving the loss of your dreams to allow you to enter into acceptance, which allows you to stop resisting reality and instead accept it so you can make different choices. How does acceptance help?
Acceptance helps in many ways. It allows yourself to move from desperation to motivation for yourself, to accept that mistakes happen and a willingness to learn and grow from them to improve. For women married to an ASD spouse, she needs to come to an understanding of what is realistic versus perception, what relationship is supposed to be according to books or movies. ASD is neurological, it's in their DNA, and can only be modified to a degree.
So acceptance, I also teach. I teach that acceptance is that thing that allows you to stop resisting and instead embrace or accept. And it literally means when you accept that you put out your hands, if you can visualize that, if you're listening, put out your hands and accept what is, and take what is offered. So it's like you're putting out your hands and you're saying, okay, I am married to a man with Asperger's. This is not going to be the normal marriage of my dreams, my expectations, and the things that I see around me and maybe even my friends have. It's going to be different. I'm going to stop fighting that. I'm going to stop trying to force it to be a normal or neurotypical marriage. And I'm going to accept that there's going to be some differences, and my husband might not be able to do all the things that I need in the way that I need them. And I'm going to stop trying to force that. Is that right?
Yes. And then I think also when you come to acceptance, you're coming, you're allowing the circle to close in in the grieving process. You may go back and forth at different times here and there, but for the big bulk majority of it, there's the full circle, and the circle is now complete because you've gone through almost all of the grieving process and have come to, okay, I'm going to stay in this marriage. It's going to look different, and this is what it's going to look like.
And the grief process is shock, denial, then anger, then bargaining, then sadness, and then finally acceptance. And there's also a sixth stage. After acceptance comes hope and possibility. And I love that because once you accept, then it's kind of like, okay, I accept that. Now what can I do given the fact that this is my reality? And once I ask that question, it's not that I'm resigned to something horrible, it's that I have choices. And those choices, you two are saying, is what gives you back your sense of self.
That is true.
Yes.
That's one thing we like to emphasize with the women, that we're not trying to take something away from them necessarily and have them lower their expectation, but to shift and adjust that they can still have that expectation, have the hope of that expectation, but that expectation is going to be fulfilled differently. And we need to stop comparing our relationships to the neurotypical ones.
Mm-hmm.
This is our neurodiverse relationships is our normal. It's our culture. We are a group of right now almost 500 who are all experiencing the same thing. So this is our typical. This is our normal.
Boy, that's really, really a huge statement.
Right.
This is, for us in an Asperger marriage, married to a man with Asperger's, this is our normal.
Mm-hmm.
That would bring you right square into acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a powerful thing to say, oh, but this is my normal, but this is our normal, knowing that you have others, you're not alone. So, what else can wives do to restore their sense of self?
So you can practice healthy, positive self talk, which looks like speak affirmations to yourself, believing you could impart and navigate challenges to recognize your own choices to influence yourself. Your words may become self fulfilling prophecies.
And what you mean by that is affirmations is affirming something that you know to be true and that you want to believe in a stronger way. So you would say things to yourself like, I have a new normal. I am able to look at my husband differently. I am restoring my sense of self. I am taking care of myself. I am a person. I can restore who I need to be. Whatever it is that you need to affirm, I'm okay.
Mhm.
Whatever that is, you're going to say that to yourself regularly. It's kind of like replacing the thought, like I teach, replacing
Yes.
thoughts that are damaging or distorted or untrue. And you're affirming what you know you need to believe in a stronger way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes, I mean, I know for me, for a long time, I actually had to repeat words back to myself. Actually, I forced myself, well,
Mhm.
my therapist suggested this to me to look at myself in the mirror and speak to myself. That could be scripture, that could be um, I think I mostly, if I remember right, I mostly used scripture like, I am a child of God. I am God's daughter. I am beautiful. And I had to stand, like I said, in front of that mirror and look into the mirror and speak those things to myself until I actually started to believe them
Mhm.
and know them to be true in
Yeah.
my heart.
Yes. And that's what the affirmation part is. You have to say them in order to recognize in a much more full way that they are true. And I can imagine myself standing there needing to say, I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
I'm going to make it.
Yes.
Okay. So now medication is always a personal choice, meaning medication for mental illness, but sometimes it's necessary because prolonged chronic stress can deplete our neurotransmitters. So, do women sometimes have to take medication as a part of their self-care?
Yes, they do. Sometimes medication is necessary for a season, but it can be also long term. And this can be for depression and or anxiety.
And again, that's a personal choice, but just an option. Recognizing again that self-care is giving yourself what you need
Yes.
that will make life better for you to function better, and recognizing your needs. And if you have a prolonged depression or anxiety that's a level where you can't function, you need to seek help. Usually
Yes.
sometimes from your personal physician if they're knowledgeable, and sometimes from a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
So what else can wives do?
Well, they can take time to be courageous. They can think through relationship alternative perspectives, develop resilience. One thing that I did was create a space room just for yourself. And it's a place that's decorated, furnished in ways that reflect you to relax, that gives you a space to breathe. I have a room for myself with a desk and a computer to study and do classes without being interrupted. I also have a separate nook area with a comfortable chair, decorations, and plants that I like, where I read in the morning and the evening time.
So that also, if you don't have a place in your house, because I love this idea that you need to be able to have a place where you can actually think and kind of pull yourself together. Maybe it's just to relax and kind of have your time where you can be separate from whatever it is that's going on that's stressing you. But if a woman doesn't have a place in her house, maybe you need to have a special place at a coffee shop where you go, where you get to know people and they greet you and they say hello and they say your name. And you go in and you have coffee and you take your time to just sit and do like thinking, like you said, to have um, different perspectives on what is going on. Also, it could be at a park. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a special place where you go and you sit where there's beautiful trees and flowers. I just read an article in Epic Times this past week that talked about how our brain is wired for beauty,
Mm-hmm.
that we naturally recognize beauty and patterns in like nature, and how it literally they did a study where they like looked at your heart rate and different things that showed how your body, your autonomic nervous system was reacting to like beautiful things. And it was that your heart rate slowed, the blood pressure dropped, and there was a calming effect just by looking at things that were beautiful. So going into nature and sitting and either walking or just sitting and looking at it is actually therapeutic and healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that idea. Now, boundaries, they take the longest to set. And I always tell women and men that you've got to kind of work through all the other things before you're ready to set boundaries. So don't push yourself to set them before you're ready, because once you set them, you don't want to back down. You want to be able to hold firm. But often you don't even know what your boundaries are for a while until you kind of sort everything out and figure out. Plus, you've got to have a self to communicate boundaries and to know your boundaries and also to say your boundaries. So it takes a while. So be gentle with yourself and do not expect to get there until you've done some work. But how do boundaries help? And can you give us some examples?
Yes. So here are some examples that you can do to create healthy boundaries. Know what you want, communicate them clearly, what you are willing to do, and what you are not willing to do.
So do you have specific examples? Maybe the two of you have you give us some examples of boundaries you've set.
Yes. This is an area that we hear a lot from the neurotypical women. And this is an area I experienced with Cooper and had to set a boundary. And this is where the Aspie man can become agitated and or goes into a meltdown, and they can become verbally disrespectful to abusive to the NT wife.
Mm.
So we hear, like I said, this from many of the NT wives. What I had to do with Cooper, my boundary went like this, and I had to make sure that I was in a very calm, confident state.
Mhm.
And I just spoke these words. I'm not willing to stay in the room with you when hurtful things are being said about me. If this happens again, I'm going to excuse myself and walk away. This is not to disrespect you. It's to give us each the time and space to reset ourselves. I will leave you for a half hour and then return and we can engage.
So a typical thing that happens in an neurodiverse marriage is with the Asperger's is meltdowns when they get overwhelmed,
Yes.
disintegrate. And part of that is harsh words, angry words, blunt words, hurtful words, right? Directed at the wife.
It's beyond, I will be honest with you. When it happened, it was beyond anything I had ever experienced in my life. I was just kind of like stunned in a state of shock that something could come out of that mouth to that extent. And women will say to me, well, what do I do? What do I do when he does that? Because it's so hurtful to me. And my thought that I share with them is, don't stay there and listen to it. We've got to get you to that point where you can share this boundary with him and walk away, because it's not going to do you any good for him to say that. Now, if it's during a meltdown, he's lost total control.
Mhm.
He can't stop it. So don't stay there while he does it. And it does no good for you to come back and then make accusations to him, because the truth of the matter is he feels such shame that his body did that. And he already has those regrets.
Mhm.
And once he resets himself, he really doesn't remember much past that. And he will quickly recover and go on. So we have to create that safe space for her by letting her share with him up front and then dismiss herself.
So recognizing what you're talking about is they're basically being completely dysregulated in their nervous system, and and this happens to all of us. It's being in your lower brain, and all you're doing is responding out of fight and flight. And so that's where all of that comes from. And the other thing that she needs to do when we're talking specifically about this is to be able to detach and love, recognizing this isn't about me. This is about his meltdown. This is about him being overwhelmed. This is about him feeling a extreme dysregulation, which is a fight or flight, and feeling panicked and just struggling to survive. And that's where it comes from. So I'm not going to take it personal, but I'm not going to listen to it, because once you hear it, it's hard to let go of that.
Right.
So I agree with you that that is an essential boundary that anybody needs to have in a marriage or a relationship where people start to say things like that. Don't stay and hear it, and don't think that you can counter it or reason with it, or try to explain to him, or just even go back over all of it in detail and try to correct it, because it's coming from a state of dysregulation. However, we're not saying it's okay. We're not saying that there's an excuse. We're saying there's a reason, but recognizing that that does happen, remove yourself.
Correct.
That's what you're saying. Are there other boundary examples that you can think of? Are there conversations that get kind of into like an impossible kind of spiral, or where they're very obsessed about a particular thing and just keep wanting to talk about it, and you've just got to go, I'm done. I can't do this.
Yes, I've had that happen to me, and what I've had happen to me is there still tends to be many places where there's no resolution to our discussion. So what happens is I will just let my husband know that I'm not willing to make an argument of this, and I'm just willing to agree to disagree, with the goal, hopefully later we will be able to come to a conclusion. But like I said, there still are some areas in our marriage there where we don't have any conclusions.
I actually think that that's pretty normal in marriages, but in the marriages that are dysfunctional and difficult, including my own experience with that, is there are often things that I have to do that my husband and I have to do that with. So we're not going to see eye to eye on them. Before, I felt like I had to make him understand my perspective and make him even agree with mine in order for me to be okay. And now I know I don't have to do that. And the other thing that we often do when we're losing ourselves is thinking that we have to change our own beliefs and opinions and thoughts about things to match his, that we've got to be on the same page. And we have to accept that we're not going to be on the same page. We don't have to make him think like we do, and we don't have to make ourselves think like them, like our husbands. And that is profound freedom, and keeps you from getting into these continual arguments.
Especially with an Asperger husband, when you come to accept and realize that his brain is developed so differently neurologically than our brain. So much of what they do just doesn't make sense to us. It's not going to make sense to us. And much of what we do just doesn't make sense to to them. And I know Cooper will ask 101 questions, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And he goes, but I'm just trying to make sense of what you're saying. And I'm like, but you're not. It's not. It's okay that it's not.
Mhm.
We're still going to be okay. We're different, but it's still going to be okay.
Yeah, that is huge. And when we're codependent, we tend to be enmeshed, which means we want to
Yes.
be the same. So we want to think the same and we want to feel the same, and that's not going to happen. So that's part back to that expectation that we talked about earlier. Our expectation is going to change. The marriage is going to look different. We're not going to think and feel the same about a lot of things, and it's okay because we understand why. Okay. Now,
Yes.
speaking your truth in love, you're speaking your boundaries. I hear you with a very gentle voice, explaining with a caring voice, explaining why you have boundaries. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we just state the boundary, but where does speaking the truth in love come in?
Mm. This is important too, because we need to do this. And so when you do speak your truth in love, you need to speak it without judgment, without blame, and then at the same time also validate your husband.
So give me an example of how you would do that. So I'm thinking the judgment and the blame would basically be kind of like, what's wrong with you? You don't get it. You're rigid, you're controlling, you're like blank, 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 fill in the blank, whatever you need to say. And you're ruining the marriage and you're hurting me and the kids and you're causing all the problems. That sounds like judgment and blame, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how would you
Yes.
say things like I'm really struggling or I'm concerned or I'm hurt by what you say. Let's say he has a meltdown and you walk out of the room and you don't listen to it, but you're still dysregulated yourself and you're still hurt and you can't let it go. That whole day it's kind of bothering you. Are you allowed to say, I just need to let you know that I'm still hurting from your meltdown or the things that you said? Are you allowed to say that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can say that. And that's a part of speaking your truth to your husband and letting him it kind of falls into accountability also too, whether he recognizes what he said, but you're letting him know, I'm still hurt over what happened. I still need time and space.
Okay. And then how do you validate your husband?
So validating him could be saying something as simple as, I recognize that when we were having this conversation, that I may have said some hurtful things to you also, maybe asking to seek his forgiveness in that. Also, too, maybe validating your husband is recognizing that, as we talked about before, there may not be a resolution, but could we maybe take some time and come back at this later when we're both in a calm state and can think clearly together and be respectful to each other?
And I think too that it's things like Kathleen said, like, I know that it's hard for you. I know that
Mm,
when you get dysregulated, that you say things that you don't mean. And
mm,
I know this is hard for you. And I know that whatever it is that he's going through, that he's voiced to you, that he's dealing with, right? Does that make sense?
It does.
mm-hmm.
Cooper and I
Yes.
had that experience during a therapy session. And I was the one trying to convince him, trying to get him to understand, trying to get him to agree with me. And he just shouted out, he said, these are my feelings. These are my words. And the therapist said, do you understand? He just validate him, Kathleen. And I thought, well, how can I validate him when he's speaking things that are not true? But that's not what the validation is about. We're not here to judge whether it was true or not, just to reflect back to him what you've heard him say. That's all he wanted. He wanted his words to be heard. It wasn't about whether he was right or wrong, good or bad. He just wanted to be heard. and one can validate that.
So you're saying that you're a neurotypical wife and you look at the neurodiverse, your Aspie husband, and you think your emotions are wrong. Your thoughts are wrong. Your thinking is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like mine. And you want to, by telling him he's wrong, you're going to increase his frustration. And also, that's not fair and it's not healthy. You want validation yourself. You want him, because he's looking at you and thinking the same thing. You want him to be able to say, okay, I don't understand why you feel this, but you do. So that's basically what you're saying to him is it's different and I don't understand it, but I know for you that that's true. And that's what validation is. And validation is powerful in a relationship and absolutely essential.
It turned things around. It really did. And I still, up to today, I'll do something and I say, yes, I hear that. Oh, you are. I understand that. And then the tug of war stops
Yes.
because he feels validated.
And one thing that men with just Asperger's do, if there's other things, this may not be true, but one of the things with Asperger's is that they sometimes will pick up things, they learn things that they're supposed to do and they'll pick it up. So it's sometimes they copy what they think is normal.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you begin to validate them, it's setting an example of validating you.
So it turns out to be a win-win situation.
Yeah,
It's a vital tool. Yeah.
yeah, very much. Okay, what about community? My feeling is that in order to do all of this, that you absolutely have to have support and people who understand. So where can wives of Asperger's husbands find help?
They can find help in community, and a community that is safe, that is healthy, that is positive, that is supportive, and a road to recovery. So in our group, My Aspie and Me, when women come into our group, we want them to feel safe and validated. And we want to offer them positive suggestions, not advice. We invite them to join our study classes where they can start to learn to heal and have healthy relationship dynamics, which then helps restore their sense of self. Also, allow space between the old story and the new story, that empty space there for God to enter in and a new story to be created. With no time constraints, refuse judgment, control, and allow compassion in subtle forms to emerge.
And I know from reading many of your posts, because you've allowed me to be in there, and I sometimes comment on when I have time on posts that are made, that it is a support group in that a woman can literally vent about what is going on and some situation that happened or something she's struggling with and get input from other women who are going through the same thing and have a new perspective or a different perspective or something they've learned, and it gives them so much feedback and input, and it's invaluable. And I don't know of any, I'm sure there is something else out there, but I don't know of anything. Do you?
I just want to touch base on what you said. We allow them to vent, and that's important because they need to their voice needs to be heard. However, we come alongside them and show them and guide them how to do that respectfully. We don't allow them to come in and bash their husband or lay a lot of blame.
Yes.
Or just speak negatively, because in a group that Elizabeth and we had met through, there was a lot of that going on. And after reading so many posts where it was just fragmented negativity, it personally affected us. By the time my husband would come home, I was ready to kind of like tear into him. And he had nothing to do with it. So we kind of like, yes, we want you to share this in such a way that shows respect to yourself and to your husband, because he doesn't know that he's being talked about like this.
Yes. But also frustration with the real things that are happening or with problems that they're dealing with and then getting input with solution.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's a really healthy, it is a group that is Christian based. So
Yes.
you do a vetting, and why do you do that?
Because it is a Christian base, and there are a lot of women who are not Christians. They're secular. There's a lot of them that just don't believe in God. They have other things that they believe in. We believe. We believe in God. We believe in Jesus. We believe in the Holy Spirit. And there is power in our prayer
Mm-hmm.
to help women. And so we don't, to try to commingle those can be really a struggle. That happened in the other group.
Mm-hmm.
When I was allowed to announce that I was forming this, my SBME, and that it was a Christian group, because there was a hint that there were some ladies in there. But once I did that, they turned on me and tarred and feathered me.
Yes.
I mean,
So
it was merciful.
yeah, so I think the reason is that you want to be able to give support to the spiritual
Right,
part of the women's lives that they are also trying to integrate with what's going on. And you
right.
do offer prayer, which is obviously powerful. So what about the situation with, if, well, let's see, how much change in their marriage can they reasonably expect? Because I know even though we say don't change, stop changing your husband, in the back of our minds, and maybe even out of has to be some change because the marriage is super unhealthy and not good for the kids and not good for the woman. Maybe there needs to be some change, and we're telling her that she can do the changes within herself that will have an impact on her marriage. But in the end, how much?
Well, we hear this question from women from time to time. And what we have come to learn and know is that each neurodiverse marriage is different. There are some sad stories where the ND husband, whose rigidity is high and not able to handle the necessary changes the wife makes for herself, or when she implements boundaries with saying no. These are areas that he may be unable to manage himself, so there may be separation or divorce. Then there are neurodiverse marriages where small changes are possible. The NT wife stops trying to convert her ND husband into a neurotypical husband. The wife learns to detach and to develop the ability to say yes or no to areas in the marriage, and both start to have a mutual respect for one another's requests. There is no longer the pressure to say yes to everything and then feel resentful. Rather, you develop self respect. At first, there may be some pushback from the ND husbands to the no responses from the NT wife. This is because of the change the neurodiverse husband is experiencing in his wife. He may come to observe the growing confidence in his wife as she learns to set boundaries, speaks her truth in love, and skills learned in your classes that we offer. These skills result in a healthy and more balanced marriage. However, there's much the NT wife can learn if she desires. This can become her season to regain her sense of self, her identity, and to become honest with what she seeks in a relationship marriage, how to enter into it with both eyes opened. For the Aspie man, and I have discussed this with some of them who have been divorced, that in desiring to remarry, they now know about their diagnosis, how it operates, what they are able and not able to do. They need to be open and honest to the women that they are dating, what marriage may look like. It won't be a neurotypical marriage, but a neurodiverse marriage.
So not every marriage is the same. Some, it's going to be so much rigidity that the Aspie husband won't be able to adapt even to the changes his wife is making, and then that just may not work. But
Yes.
for some, and they are able to make some changes, again, often in their perspective, their expectations, and their way of interacting with their husbands, which causes the husbands to react. It's like a dance differently back to them, which may make it workable.
Yes, you are correct on that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when does the Aspie husband have to know he has Asperger's and admit that that's true in order for this to work? Because I know that a lot are going to be very resistant to being told that they have something that makes them neurodiverse.
Yes, there can be a lot of resistance, and the answer to your question is no. They do not need to know. The wife, the wife may suspect or she may know, but she doesn't have to have a official diagnosis or have her husband go through testing for that. She may just suspect that something is off and some of the boxes that she sees are ticking. And so that's an individual choice. She can just leave that to herself if she chooses to and carry on with the marriage and her life, knowing, okay, I suspect that my husband is neurodiverse. And so I'm going to educate and learn how to handle and stay in this neurodiverse marriage.
Okay. So does therapy help? And what about marriage therapy versus individual therapy?
Both are helpful. And we suggest that the neurotypical wife by herself go and get therapy. Because if she's working with a therapist who specializes in ASD, that alone can give her some script. It can lead her into, well, this will work, that won't work. Or they can go as a neurodiverse couple and seek a therapist. But it needs to be a therapist who's going to be affirming and knowledgeable with neurodivergence. A typical therapist who is only familiar with the term neurodiversity without the experience may treat Asperger's as a personality disorder. And Cooper and I did that. We tried that. And I'm like, no, we're not talking about his personality. This is not his personality. We're talking about something that's neurological. So, and it is not or they encourage the Aspie to conform to neurotypical expectations, which then enforces the Aspie to need to mask. And this can lead to his burnout or a low self-esteem for himself.
So the therapist would be doing exactly what the wife had been trying to do that hasn't worked.
And this is, I have found this to be a reason why most men will resist going to therapy. They've already spent months or years listening to this woman list alphabetically or numerically all that they do that have failed, how wrong they are, how abusive they are. They're not willing to go spend money with a therapist who's going to confirm what she has said. But that doesn't take place when you're working with a therapist who is specializing in ASD. That doesn't take place. That therapist is there to create a safe place for each of the neurotypes, the neurotypical and the neurodiverse, and to both get validated, and then to explore each of their needs and how that can be bridged together. That's what Cooper and I experienced. Now, some women will even turn to their pastors and drag the husband with them, and that too may not fare well because the pastor may see Asperger's only as a label rather than a neurology difference. So there's the missing the important insight that diagnosis will provide.
Yeah, I think that's critical to be able to have somebody who really understands and who can give you some practical ideas of, like you said, I like that picture, the word picture of a bridge. Bridge the differences between the two of you to where you can understand each other and also to where you have a practical way of working together.
And he's very much a translator because there's things that Cooper will say, and I'm like, well, do you see what he just said? And our therapist will say, back it up. What he's really telling you is thus and so. And I'm like, oh, is that what you really mean? And Cooper will say, yes. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, he'll translate from me to him, which has been an immense help.
Oh, absolutely.
get our footing on that.
Yes, that sounds like a absolute perfect prescription for what you need. So I imagine that the neurotypical wives listening may be feeling bad about themselves right now or feeling overwhelmed. What can you say to encourage them?
Oh, we don't want the neurotypical wife to feel shame, guilt, or condemnation. We have gone through this. Elizabeth and I have gone through everything that we have shared with our listeners today. So we've got empathy for you and the behaviors as well. So please give yourself compassion and grace because your heart's intention is to improve your relationship with your aspie husband or partner. And you want better for yourself. The neurotypical wife may not be able to change him, but she can change the course of herself and for herself within the marriage relationship. This is in order to restore her sense of self. And we were talking about how much can he change. My husband has been in this therapy. He works with 2 specialists with ASD, and there has been only a margin of change. But I have sat here in tears watching him, how hard he will work at that. So even if he gives an inch, to me, that is just monumental because I know the work that's went behind it. And a lot of women don't feel like their husbands are working enough. And although they don't get a free pass, the husband, but they need to realize that his little bit is really more than a cupful.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that may be discouraging to hear that, but it is important that we deal with reality because once again, we'll go back to that statement that you said. This is basically how their brain is wired. It's in their DNA. It's who they are. That part is not going to change. So what you're looking for is functional and practical
Yes.
skills and things that you can do in your own perception and in your own behavior of how you handle this, and he learning even some things that he can apply a little bit. When you have that mindset, that makes a huge change.
One of the things that Cooper's learned how to do is to recognize the cycle, the stages of approaching into that meltdown.
Mhm.
And when he starts to feel that agitation or rumble, he has been told and taught that he needs to say, "Excuse me, I'm going in the other room for a bit and I'll be back later." And he does that.
Yeah,
So that has been a large helpful thing in our marriage.
that sounds like that would be a very necessary thing, but take a while to get to that point
Yes,
because that takes awareness of what's going on inside your body, and it takes awareness of your emotional state and your physical state. But that would be the ultimate, is having him recognize that, and rather than her having to leave, him excusing himself to go get himself regulated. So I imagine that she kind of has to come to the point where she has to say, okay, can I do this? Am I in this? Am I willing? And I've heard you say that there is no shame, that if a woman
Condemnation or
says,
guilt.
I cannot do this. This is more than I signed up for. I'm not able to find myself and get myself in a place where I can healthily stay in this marriage. Then, if that's the case and you can't, we don't want the women to feel like they're doing something. We're not talking about the spiritual side of that between themselves and God. They can have to come to terms with that. We're not going to talk about is divorce okay or not okay. But we're saying if you cannot do it, we understand. And we're not beating you up if you can't.
True, very true. And if she is considering that she wants to stay in this marriage, she needs to ask herself, am I willing to go beyond just recognizing traits of ASD and then actually studying and learning about how his brain is wired differently and operates differently? And I find that, and I did this too. Okay, here are the traits, here are the symptoms of Asperger's, check, check, check. And then our immediate thought is get him into therapy so that he can change and be neurotypical. And that's not going to work. You really have got to understand how that brain is neurologically different. And Carla, it's like you shared with us. Nobody's going to go in there and reach into that brain and turn it around, including God. I have prayed for that.
Yes.
Doesn't happen. Practical, small shifts and adjustments can take place. And then is she willing to accept, like we've talked about, that her relationship is going to have a new normal? It's going to be different in the way that communication takes place, and that he has a need for self-time. And that's because of the high anxiety that they daily live with, that his wanting that alone time doesn't mean that he doesn't love her. It doesn't mean that he's shutting her out. He's got to like reset, recompose himself. And that dating and connecting in atypical ways will take place. And Elizabeth has a little story here.
Well, this is an example from my marriage of where I kind of had to coach my husband. So we were going out for an anniversary dinner, and I had to tell my husband that I need you to be rested and happy and stop working on what you're doing so you have downtime to be ready to go out and have a nice dinner. For a neurotypical wife, that would probably be nagging. But for a wife in a neurodiverse marriage, she needs to accept that she may need to direct him and that his responses may be robotic and programmed rather than with the fluidity that many neurotypical men may exhibit.
So that would be kind of a thing that you've come to where you recognize I have to tell him what I need or what is the way that this situation is going to occur. Like I think you've said things like if you're in like a large group or a family group that you might have to say to him, please don't talk about these subjects because he may not, because one of the things that they have difficulty with is recognizing social cues, and they're like kind of awkward and off. So you might want to say, in this time, we're not going to talk about this, or maybe his favorite subject. I've been with Asperger's men and women where they get on something and they don't get off of it, and they just literally dominate the entire conversation, and everyone else is like bored and has lost interest and they're just continuing to go on and they're not picking up those cues, but the wife certainly is, and she's really uncomfortable. So you may need to say, like, remember, maybe don't bring this topic up, but when you bring up this, only talk about it for a few minutes and then let other people talk. Now, this is if he's willing to allow her to say these things, gotten to the place where you have more that calm in the relationship and there's more trust and there has been validation where probably you can say that and he would accept it. Or do a lot of Asperger's men, are they comfortable hearing things like that?
I think a lot of it depends on how it's presented to them. If it's done in a respectful manner, like, I know that you really want to talk about that. And basically they're doing that because they're trying to show that we're at a family gathering and I'm trying to be interactive with these people and trying to make conversation with them. They just miss that part that it's gone on too long. And so if you kind of talk to them about it before the event and kind of put some structured guidelines in there, say, if you get to talking too much, I'm going to kind of give you a little tap on and then you hope that they remember that cue. Or you can just say, oh, excuse me, honey, can you come over here? I just need to speak with you a moment. It just needs to be done respectfully and kindly. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there are 5 common love languages that people have: gifts, quality time, affection, acts of service, and words of affirmation. Do Asperger men have the same love languages as neurotypical men?
Yes and no. Both men will do acts of service, and both types of men can give gifts, although gift giving for an Aspie man can be very unique.
So I know that, Kathleen, you had mentioned before, I remember this, that Cooper actually sets a timer on his phone to text you a love text or an image.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that he needs to do. And a lot of women would say, well, if you have to set a timer, it's meaningless. If you have to have a reminder,
Yes.
then it doesn't come from your heart. How do you accept that as a message of love?
Well, I felt sorry for them because this is what my heart desires. You see, this is a part of my love language. It's not his, but he's willing to do that for me. Now he's willing to do it because he loves me. That has meaning to it. Now he was taught to do this. Again, part of our therapy. Do you understand? Kathleen has a need for it. This is the way you can do this for her. And it was awkward at first for him. He's gotten very good at it. And he finds the cutest things to send to me. But it does have meaning. It has very deep meaning. And this happened just recently. A few Saturdays ago, there was a song he found that he really wanted to give to me, and he wrote out the words. And some of the words were very kind of practical, and some of them were very sentimental. The practical was like, "You're my Tylenol to my headache." And then some of them were just sweet. The
Mm-hmm.
woman who sang the song had an endearing voice. This song meant a lot to him. And as I was watching the words as he played the song, I looked at him and he actually had tears in his eyes and his heart was filled. And I thought, what woman would melt for something like this? Again, done differently,
Yes.
presented differently, wrapped differently. But oh my gosh, I savor every little thing that he does like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cute thing to do. What about things like parallel play? Is that part of their love language?
Yes, it is. So, examples of parallel play could be like watching a movie or chatting about a movie together, doing projects together. My husband and I recently had done some remodeling of a bathroom. And after a very long day, my husband surprised me by turning on the radio to a country music station, grabbing my hand and asking me to do a two-step slow dance with him.
In the
And
bathroom?
the bathroom wasn't done yet, but in another area of there. And it was just, it for him to do that, it just touched my heart. It just melted my heart like no tomorrow because he's communicating his love language to me. And he recognized that we had put in a very long day and was basically saying to me, like, I appreciate and I love you. Thank you for helping me do this.
And I remember when I first met you that the dynamics that you had in your marriage, not between him and between the way you were reacting to him, that would never have happened, would it?
No, no, absolutely not. I mean, I would have never even guessed in 1,000 years that he would be, that we would be doing this
Because it was
currently,
more,
even now.
yeah, it was more adversarial because you were bumping up against him and trying to get him changed, and you
Yes,
were hurting with the things that he was doing, and you were taking it as though it was mean and as though he was, abusive. And I'm not saying that those meltdowns and words and things can't feel like that, and sometimes they are abusive, but you were taking that negatively, and it was causing there to be a lot of dissatisfaction on your part, but also a lot of distance and a lack of connection. So by doing these things that we've suggested and the principles that you've learned in my classes, you have changed the way you interact with him and the perspective of your marriage, which has opened that door to allow things like that to happen. And I know that there's other women that have experienced that in your group. And we'll talk about an example of that at the end. But what about affection? Do they do affection normally, or is there some differences with that?
well, honestly, like the marriages, it's like the men. It can be different. You know what I mean? There's yes and no's to that. So affection, such as bear hugs, some can be very robotic. Some men are just they're wired like that. And then there are some men where maybe they're a little bit less on the spectrum, but they're more natural. Their approach feels natural. It's not that roboticness.
Okay, and then what about unmasking?
Unmasking also can be very different for each man, but there can be tears. I've seen tears, which could be tears of joy. There could be happy tears. There could be sad tears. I
And
have experienced
what do you mean by unmasking?
unmasking. So unmasking for an Asperger man can be very difficult. And when unmasking, meaning they're taking the mask off, it's like all of us when we're in that dating stage, right? We all have our great happy masks on. We put our best foot forward in the dating stages. And then later on, maybe hopefully we get married, then our mask comes off, right? And we're able to feel like we can be relaxed and be our more true, authentic self with that person. We're not putting this performance on for them, so to speak. So with Aspie men, that's hard to do because they already have the anxiety piece, and then they probably have a history of maybe being bullied or if they do or don't have a diagnosis, feeling different.
Mhm.
So it's really coming down to, do I trust this person enough to take my mask off? Are they still going to love me if I'm able to be vulnerable? So it can look like that.
And so that one would be him somehow part that makes it a love language in that however he unmasks himself and shows you a vulnerable side of him is actually a way of showing you love, meaning I trust you enough to allow you to see this. And so you're saying a woman needs to recognize that and take that as a love gesture of, wow, you are safe enough for me that I'm willing to show you my vulnerable side.
Yes,
Yes. Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm. Okay. What about helping without words by doing tasks? Can you give some examples of this?
I can give you an example of that. So I had been wanting pull-out drawers for the longest time in my kitchen, and it did take a long time because we have a very small kitchen. And so my husband was actually able to measure, and I remember him telling me that he had been looking literally for over a year for pull-out drawers. And he finally was able to track it down and go online and find a company that would be able to have them delivered to our house. He had to install them himself, which he was great at doing. But when he did that, that just brought me such great joy as an act of service. And I still cherish that to this day. So just most Aspie men, not all of them, are task oriented because of their how their brain is wired. But if you can just look for those little things or see those little things when they're doing their tasks and recognizing that, giving them back words of affirmation. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. It really does go a long way.
And I've heard you say that when you have a very long day, that your husband has dinner ready when you get home, and sometimes not just buying it, but actually making it, and that you recognize that as part of his love language, that he's
Mhm.
actually recognizing you had a long day and he's helping you by making dinner. And rather than it just be like, oh, well, he's got dinner ready, you're like, wow, he loves me and he cares about me. He was thinking about me. So it is a mindset where you recognize those things.
Hmm. It is absolutely. And he's very intentional about, he will send me a text and say, can you let me know what time you're going to be home? And I mean, there's been times I've literally walked in the door and the dinner is prepared and it's ready to go. And it's for me. It was intentional because he wanted to do that.
What about some unusual gifts?
Oh, my most unusual gift. I had to, when we were first married, I had to learn to like not touch something or compliment it, because if I did, it found its way home in a surprise. And
Like in a store?
yeah,
Like
this is
you
a
looked at
beautiful.
it, you looked at a top or a blouse or a jacket in a store, and then you went, "Oh, that's pretty." Then you'd get it.
Well, this is a good example. Cooper had a podiatric seminar in Beverly Hills, and I went with him. And during a break, we went shopping at Gary's on Rodeo Road or whatever street it was. The beautiful crystal and silver and whatever. And on the shelf was this crystal milk jug, a very expensive piece of crystal. And I picked it up, and my thought was, who would ever buy this thing? It's so heavy. And look at the price tag on it. Well, it came Christmas, and there was this box from Gary's wrapped under the tree, and I opened it up, and it was this milk jug.
Oh my.
And it sits in my china cabinet, and I just go by it and go, I am so loved.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. And we have women, we were just talking about this in group, and one woman said, well, I got gardening supplies in a wheelbarrow. And realizing that our men are very practical,
Mhm.
task-oriented, so they're going to look in that direction. Or there's some things that man finds very attractive, and he'll think, oh, I'd like to see my wife in that. Now, she may not want to be wearing that, but that's not how he sees it. Well, it gets wrapped up and it gets delivered to her. But these are acts of love.
Wow.
Not
Interesting.
not
So
not
definitely,
yeah, not reducing the husband to childhood, but you remember when our children made those little gifts in school and brought them home? We treasure those.
exactly.
Kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing. Okay, so, and then I think you've also mentioned something called information dumping, where a wife may feel overwhelmed with all the information that he dumps on her, but recognizing that when he does an information dump, that also can be act of love. It could be a love language of him saying, I'm willing to trust you with all of this. And so when you get one of these information dumps, rather than feeling overwhelmed by it or annoyed by it, that you accept it as a compliment.
Mhm.
True.
Yes.
Okay, so we could talk for 2 more hours, I'm certain, about things that we can suggest that have been helpful for you and the women in your group, or that are helpful. But we're going to wrap it up with a testimony just recently from a woman in your group who gave permission to share this about how all this comes together when you restore your sense of self.
Right. Her name's Pauline, and she came to our group about 4 years ago. She was wounded from childhood and married to an Aspie, and her heart was hurting. She was in tears. And we started her by taking the wounds class, and then she took Truth in the Mirror, and then went on to Thriving in Difficult Marriages, the 10 Principles. And she worked her way through codependency and relationship dependency. And she is a nature person, like you're talking about, Carla. She likes to get out there and hike. Husband really doesn't have much interest in that, but he supports her in it. And she started by thinking, well, unless we share the same activity and we can both feel the same, then it's not going to mean much to her. And we're saying, well, there's another way to look at this. Well, she went on to this hike not long ago, and then she wrote us this message, and she said, I could not have followed through on this trip without the love and support of my husband. I know he missed me because he changed the sheets on my bed, bought me flowers, and cleaned the house. I accepted the fact that his love language is doing things for me, not using words. We are both learning to accept each other for who we are. So she is no longer depending on her husband to share in the same interest as she has. She is finding joy for herself and going on to be with her girlfriends and not feeling guilty for doing so. And so what we see is her growth and restoration of her sense of self. Now, what her husband is able to offer to her becomes meaningful to her. And this is such a good example of what we experience. It brings Elizabeth and I a lot of joy. And we hear this from other women too, who have been able to find like a neurodiverse therapist. And the woman has said, we were at our wits' end. She goes, I didn't know that this marriage would continue, but working with this therapist, I now have compassion for my husband. That touches my heart because for so many years I had such contempt for Cooper. Now I have that compassion and love for him.
Yes, and I would think that even if a woman isn't with a neurodiverse therapist, just by being in a group or by reading and understanding more about the neurodiverse man's
Yes.
brain,
Yeah.
that she would also get that compassion,
Right.
which is critical to not, instead of that judgment and blame, like you talked about, that she has compassion and understanding and acceptance that he is different and that the marriage will be different. But that when she moves into that acceptance, she looks at, just like this woman, she finds ways to be healthy within the marriage. And there may be things that they find that they can do together, as in all marriages. I mean, in my marriage, my husband and I have a lot of different interests. He hunts. I could spend every day of my life at the beach. And I often, like I go to Hawaii for a couple weeks a year by myself because he doesn't have time. He comes for a week, but he doesn't have time to stay the whole time. So I stay longer to get my beach fix and my Hawaii fix. And we're okay with that. He goes on his hunting trips, and no, I don't want to go hunting with him. And that's okay. But when we think we have to be the same, we experience that frustration. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I know that each of you have expressed many different outcomes that you have in your own marriages from applying these principles. And I didn't know you, Kathleen, before you did these things, but I did know Elizabeth, and I have seen a huge change in Elizabeth and a huge change in Elizabeth's life from doing the same. So there is hope, like we talked about.
Yes, that is the bottom line. There
Mhm.
is hope. It's just going to come differently.
Yes, it's going to look different. So, well, we have had a very lengthy discussion, but I am thrilled with the practical help that I think that you both have been able to offer to women that are married to Asperger's men. And let's just say if there's a man listening to this who's married to an Asperger woman, that these things will also be helpful in their marriage. It's just you deal with mostly women, so just to make it easy to have a conversation, we made it where the woman was the neurotypical and the man was the neurodiverse. But there are more men that do have neurodiverse brains than women.
True.
Statistics will show that. So there is definitely more women coming into counselors' offices that are struggling with this. And it's becoming very common. It's like a absolute like explosion of the number of diagnoses of Asperger's we've had in the last, what is it, 20 years, something like that?
As of 2025 in the state of California, which the three of us are in, 1 in 22 children at the age of 4 years old is being diagnosed with ASD.
I heard that it could be even as much as 1 in 12 the other day, but maybe I was reading something
Well,
that
and you see, and see, this is interesting too. Just to wrap this up, our neurotypical women say, "Well, he's got to do more work because there's more of us neurotypical than there are neurodiverse." And I'm like, I'd kind of hold my breath on that one because the numbers are closing in. Those margins aren't as large as they used to be. And these are just children that are being diagnosed. And if you
Yeah.
know that the autism spectrum disorder is 80 to 90% genetic, and
Mm,
you know that mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, or somebody in the family is carrying this gene, which adds to the population.
yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you both for taking this time to, I know you spent time putting the presentation together and you worked on it, so I appreciate all the effort that you've put into this as well as the time. And we actually recorded this the other day and I forgot to press record. So this is a take two, and I'm actually really happy with our take two. I think we did a
Yes.
better job. And
Yes.
so God works in mysterious ways. But
Thank you,
so,
Carla, for having us back and allowing us to share with the women.
oh, you're
Yes,
really
thank
welcome.
you.
Yes. So All right. Thank you for listening to this podcast on Change My Relationship. Please write to me at carla@changemyrelationship.com if you have questions about this or if you need more help in being referred to the private Facebook group, My Aspie and Me, or anything else. So, and I can also say that you're welcome to join my classes at any time, which many women have done, including Elizabeth and Kathleen, to if there isn't something offered within the Facebook group at that particular time, women find it very helpful to get the same classes through me and work on those skills, even though it's not within your group. So please let me know. Also, we'd love to hear how this helped you and how this has been something that's been a huge benefit to you. So God bless you, and please share this with other people that you know that are struggling in an Asperger's marriage, and let us know if there's anything else. Yes.
And may I just share that if you're interested in joining our group as a support group, when we receive your request, we will be responding back to you via your Facebook message. So make sure that Messenger is turned on, or you check Facebook message for our response to you.
Got it. Yes, because you can find them on Facebook by looking up My Aspie and Me and sending them a message. So, all right, God bless you. And we look forward to having you at the next Change My Relationship podcast.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Change My Relationship. We hope you will subscribe to these podcasts and share them with your friends. Carla would love to hear from you. She welcomes ideas for future podcasts as well as your feedback on how the podcast have helped your life and relationships. You can email her at carla@changemyrelationship.com. For more information on Change My Relationship and Carla Downing's ministry, including her books, studies, devotionals, podcast, and YouTube videos, visit changemyrelationship.com.